My name is Carin, and I'm an alcoholic. Happy to be here. Right before the meeting started, Thomas, who I love and adore, found me doing my thing before the meeting. You know, you have to get into the mode before you come up here and talk to God and do all my thing. And he just walked over to me and said, "So, are you ready to have your big number 2?" Well, I guess I am. Anyway, my sobriety date is September the 8th, 1988. Most of you know I got sober in New York City. I'm from the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm so glad to see so many of you who came back this week. We'll try to pick up where we left off last week and see what happens. I brought my glasses with me, so I'm bound to do better this week than I did last week, so I can actually see this. So I wanna backtrack for like 2 seconds about where we left off in step 1 last week. We talked about the recognition, the admission, the understanding that if we were real alcoholics in step 1, we were powerless over alcohol when we were drinking it. Not when we weren't, but when we were drinking it. And my life was unmanageable when I wasn't. And we talked a lot about behaviors of the alcoholic when they're drinking and when they're not drinking. And they seemed incredibly similar to me. I don't know about you, but there didn't seem to be a big line in between my behavior between when I was not drinking and when I was drinking. So here's the problem. And this is the problem with all the steps, just so you know. At the end of the step, you're like screwed. At the end of every step, you're screwed. What do I do now? What do I do now? You've given me another set of information, another set of things to do. You want my belief. You want this. You want that. I don't know how to do it. What am I supposed to do? So for me, when I did the steps, I had to really think about the fact that for me, at the end of every step was kind of like a comma. It really wasn't a full stop. It's a comma. You know, what do I have to do? What am I going to do? Now I'm at the end of step 1 and I am absolutely screwed. If you're telling me that I can't live my life drinking and I can't live my life without drinking, where does that leave me? Well, it leaves me into step 2 because that's the comma. It gives you the answer at the end of the step. When you catapult into the next step with the understanding that that's the answer to the problem that you just found out about in the step prior. Does that make sense to everybody? So when I get to the end of step 1, I'm like, okay, I know what to do now. So here's my problem. I didn't like step 2. I had a lot of problems with it. You know, step 2, hello, have a seat. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So here's my problem with the step. First of all, I had no God. I've talked about that before. When I did my first steps, I had no God in my life. So that was the first problem. Second problem is I had a sponsor who made me go to a lot of step meetings. That's a big problem. Because what you hear, how many people here in this room read the daily reflections? Most of us read the daily reflections. So it was pointed out to me in the beginning, thank God, that the beginning of the daily reflection, the reading from our literature, that's AA. That second part is some drunk's opinion on it. It means nothing. I could write it. You could write it. It means nothing. So I had to really focus here on what people were saying about the second step. And what I heard as an alcoholic who had no God in my life, who had no faith, who had no nothing, what I heard in there was people just debating the hell out of what sanity was. Let's discuss sanity. Well, here's the definition. And if you think it's this and maybe it's that, you know, I thought, I don't care. Not only do I not care what sanity is, I still don't know if I have any, and I'm sober more than 35 years. I have no idea. I still do some of the same crazy stuff that I used to do when I was drinking. The only difference now is, thank God, I do it with other alcoholics. That's the best part. I don't have to do this by myself. So I take a look at this, and it says it's going to restore me to sanity. So I hear all this argument about what sanity is. And then I hear all this argument about what the power greater than myself is. And neither one of these things holds much interest for me because I don't believe in either one of them. I have no idea what they're talking about. The thing with the steps is this. When you read a step, you're only going to get part of it. There's only some of it that's going to speak to you. And the rest of it is going to be, I have no idea. So you don't worry about it. Because when you work those steps with the next alcoholic, you're going to understand a little bit more. And then you're going to understand a little bit more. And by the time you work these steps with 5 or 6 people, you're going to know exactly what that step means. But for me, I was told by my sponsor to focus on restoration because I didn't know what it meant. on restoring me, because step 2 could be the most intensely personal step of all the 12 steps. This is a step between me and whoever is going to become my God. This is a step between me and whoever is going to be guiding me through the rest of my sobriety. So the problem is that I really didn't know what to do because I had no God. So he said, don't focus on God. Don't focus on sanity. Let's talk about restoring. Let's talk about what restoration looks like for you. So 18 months before I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve. It was 1986, 86, 87, something like that. I was in Florida. I was in Tamarack, Florida. My parents owned a house in Tamarack, Florida. I was from New York. I hated being in Tamarack, Florida. And for New Year's, no less, for New Year's. So, so my parents, I was married to my second husband, I was married to my son's husband. I had a little baby. He'd just been born a few months before New Year's Eve. And my parents got tickets to something, some show or something like that. You know, where they have those long tables that everybody sits around, like really long tables, and the stage is over there, and horrible stuff. And so we, went to this, or we're getting dressed to go to this thing, and I'm in the bedroom alone. Because by that time in my career of life, I had a drug habit that was so low bottom that I was incapable of one day, 1 hour, not being high enough to get around. And I had a drinking problem that was so horrendous that I stank. The Jack Daniels was coming out of my pores. I was 340 pounds. I was a daily drug user. I was a daily and nightly drinker. There was nothing left of me. I dressed in black all the time, head to toe in black, blamed it on being from New York. And as I'm getting dressed in the bedroom alone, that's important to remember, because by then I'm alone. I'm married, I have a kid, I have a family, and I'm alone. And I'm in the bedroom and I look in the mirror and I take one glance, and what is looking back at me is a person with shark eyes, dead eyes looking at me. And I don't know where this came from. To this day, I don't know where it came from. But I turned around and I looked in the mirror and I said, God, I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to stop. You have to make me stop. I'll do anything. I'll do anything if you just make me stop. Now, if I had stopped my prayer at that point and not said anything else, you'd have a different speaker in front of you. Because what I said after that was, and I need a sign. I need a sign that you've heard me. Because I'm an alcoholic that doesn't believe anything. I don't even believe what he was saying. And I said, I need to have a sign from you. And I got a tingling in my mouth. I went, oh my God, I got a sign from God. And so I got dressed and we left and we went to this place, and the waiter came and took my order. My dinner order was the same as my drink order, was the same as my dessert order. All Jack Daniels straight up. Puts it down in front of me. I go to take the drink and there's a tingling in my mouth. I went, oh my God. So I put the glass down. This goes on all night long. I'm cold, stone sober. By the time New Year's comes, I have not had a thing to eat or drink. And we leave. They blast off New Year's and we leave, and I go home. And I go home with my husband with the understanding that I have found God, and God is now talking to me through my Jack Daniels. It made sense to me. Anyway, I went home, and I don't know about you, but that's not the sort of thing you tell anybody, that God is talking to you through Jack Daniels. So I went to sleep. He went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, somewhere around 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, with the most intense pain I had ever experienced. And I jumped up and I fell to the ground because I had no feeling on the right side of my body. I ran into the bathroom. I looked aside, and my entire right side of my body was all sagging. My shoulder was down. Everything was sagging. And I went into my parents' room, woke my mother up and said, Mommy, something's wrong with me. Look at my face, look at my body, something's wrong with me. And she goes, probably a tooth abscess. Go take a Valium. So I did. And I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I was worse than I was at 3 o'clock in the morning. They rushed me to the hospital, and the doctor took one look at me, and he said, how old are you? And I was young. I was in my early 30s. And he said, do you abuse drugs? Do you abuse alcohol? I've never seen this kind of a stroke happen in a person of your age. Do you abuse any of these things? And I said, no, of course not. I'm a mother. No way. And he says, I have no idea what to tell you, but I will tell you this. He said, you have to stay down here in the sun because the cold in New York at Christmas time, during the winter time, is going to exacerbate the pain that you're feeling. He says, I can tell you this, you're going to have to wear an eye patch for a year. He says, you're going to have to go for physical therapy, intense physical therapy, and maybe within a year you will get back 50% of your motion. And I left and went back and saw my mother and told her what she said, and my mother took one look at me and she said, oh, I'm so sorry. You have to go. I can't have you in my house looking like that. We entertain. And so we got on the plane and we went back to New York. And I'd like to tell you that I did everything that he said, but I am an alcoholic. I got everything I needed up a straw. I couldn't speak. That's the other thing. I guess that was a joy to some people, but I couldn't speak, couldn't say anything because this whole side of my face wasn't working. My arm wasn't working. So I couldn't hold the baby and I couldn't see, and I had to go back to physical therapy. So if you went to physical therapy the way I did, you would have the exact same results that I had, which was zero. Because I had to go loaded every time. So I want you to know for the next year, 15 months, I'll say, the next 15 months, first of all, what I did is going to date me so horribly. First of all, what I did was I went out and I took a Polaroid camera and I took a picture of my face. And I said, smile, motherfucker. And I said, this is what you've done to yourself. And I carried that photo around with me until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. So I want to say that, for a long time, I absolutely believe there was no God at all, because if there was a God, God did this to me. This was not for me. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that, almost 37 years later, I will tell you that if that had not happened to me, you'd have a different speaker tonight. Because I was absolutely, positively on my way to dying. And this was the last stop for me. So by the time I came into AA, I had done enough therapy and enough exercises so that I came in and I looked fairly normal. Although I will tell you that, I still get injections all the time to make sure that my body parts are working, because I didn't recover 50%. I recovered probably 75 to 80%. But it still was a big deal. And sometimes when I forget, and it's more often than I would like, sometimes when I forget, somebody who was close to me will say to me, time to get a shot. Somebody who's not close to me will say, have you just been to the dentist? Because my speech becomes slurred again and my eye closes and it's, not pleasant. So I want you to know that that's how I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And so if you're cleaning the slate and you think you come into AA and now show me about God, think about how I came into AA. I was belligerent as all get out. There was no way you were going to convince me that there was any kind of God whatsoever, because I knew what God had done to me, because I'd asked him for help. What I didn't know was that I'd asked him for help and I'd gotten it. I just didn't know. So the problem is that when it talks about that you came to believe, if you're lucky like me, and again, I don't say that you should have happened to you what happened to me, but if you're lucky like me, that leaves you in exactly the place that they want to leave you at the end of step 1, where I have no place else to go. I don't know what else to do. So if you tell me what to do, I'm going to do it. So 18 months after I had this stroke, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and my home group was on 96th Street in Broadway, and I lived on 87th Street in West End. You do the math. It took me 5 days to get into that room. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Walk in, there'd be a bar, block away, have to go in there. Couldn't do it. 5 days. I started on a Sunday, and I wound up in the room on Thursday. And I came in sober. I did not come in drunk. And in those days, some of you were old like me. In those days when you came into AA, we weren't going to treatment centers then. Thank God for me. Thank God. I still love the smell of a newcomer. I'll sidle up to you in a skinny minute. Just take that big whiff of something that smells good, and I'll say, sit down, we're going to help you in this room. But, the women, especially in my home group, were not, we weren't going to treatment centers because they took your kids. That's the thing. They took your kids. It was a very unforgiving system at the time. Much better now. Much better now. And by the way, I'm just going to put a shout out to the women here who have gone into AA and brought your children with you. I brought my son in as a baby. He was a baby in a stroller, and nobody ever told me not to come. Nobody ever said anything. As a matter of fact, Don't make me cry. As a matter of fact, the women, I would come in and they'd take the baby immediately. I never even, really saw my son for a good year when I brought him into AA. And he spent the next 8 years of his life in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. We worked out a system because he was bored. When the person finished speaking up there and people clapped, that was our signal to go. But he was good. He was good for AA for 8 years. Anyway, I came into AA because, I had no place else to go. And at that time, I was going back and forth from Los Angeles to New York for work, back and forth. And I had the opportunity, the good graces, to meet Clancy. And I met him young in my sobriety, and he had no patience for me or probably anybody else at that point, but really no patience with me. And I said to him, I don't get this. I just don't get it. I've been here for maybe 3 months and I don't get it. Why isn't this happening for me? I don't believe in this God. And he shook me and he said, nobody told you have to believe in God. Nobody told you have to believe in a power greater than yourself. Nobody told you have to believe in anything that's on that list. But you better learn how to believe in something. And I don't care what it is. So for me, I had to rack it. What I really believed in at that time, I'm sorry, was money. Money was a good thing for me to believe in. I thought, from the bottom of my feet, if I had enough money that nothing bad was going to happen. And I can tell you that in my drinking days, I had a lot of money. I was poor and I was rich. Rich is better, by the way, but still, it was a real problem because money didn't change anything. So Clancy said to me, you have to believe in something. And, years later, just a year later, I had my first sponsee. I will never forget this. I couldn't stomach her. And she, every day, we would meet. In those days, understand, there's no cell phones and no computers. So if you have to meet with somebody, you have to look at them, which was uncomfortable for me because I didn't like her. And, and she had a headache every day. She had a headache. And every day she would say, I have a headache. I think I'm getting a brain tumor. After, 3 months, 4 months, I was hoping she would have a brain tumor because she was just too much for me. And so I said to her, why don't you believe in God? I didn't believe in God. I said, why don't you believe in God? You have to believe in something. Listen, when Clancy is your mentor, you just repeat everything he says. You don't even have to believe it. You just repeat everything he says. So I said, you don't have to believe in God. I said, but you got to believe in something. And she goes, I want to believe in God, but I can't find God. I said, okay, hold on. I'll get back to you. By the way, that's the best kind of sponsor you can have. The sponsor who doesn't know what they're talking about, who says, hang on a second, I'll get back to you. And they check with somebody else. So I called Clancy and I said, I have this girl and she won't believe in anything and I don't really know what to do with her. He says, give me your number. So I give him her number. He calls her up and he says to her on the phone, this is Clancy. And she said, this is whoever. And then he said, how you doing today? And she goes, I'm fine. He says, you think I'm doing better than you? And she goes, well, I guess you are. He says, congratulations. I'm your new higher power. And he hung up the phone and she called me up and she said, I will do anything you say as long as he is not my higher power. Anyway, when I came into AA, they sat me in the front. The old timers sat me in the front and I sidled up to the back. I just had to sit in the back. I don't know, I had to sit in the back. I couldn't be a part of. I was angry, really angry to be there. I still didn't feel well physically. People weren't talking to me because I would make an announcement every day that said, I'm Carin, I'm an alcoholic, and I don't want to talk to anybody. So that's what happens when you say, I don't want to talk to anybody, miracles happen, nobody talks to you. And that meant that nobody, held my hand after the meeting, and I didn't have any of these deep conversations. And one day a woman named Janice came up to me, and I saw her that one day, and then I saw her 30 years later. And that one day she turned around and she said to me, when you identify your unmentionable wrong, you will begin to get well. It was pretty intense. And I kept that with me for a very long time. And eventually, when we get to talking about the fourth step, we'll talk a lot about that unmentionable wrong because I did identify it. I did find it. And when I found it, my God, it came pouring out of me. So people one by one came and talked to me a little bit. And I was not a good AA person. I need to tell you, this is a very civilized group here. My group on the Upper West Side was called the Wild Wild West. And we had fist fights in there. People threw things at each other. Smoking meeting, eating meeting, where you brought your own food, throw it on the floor, terrible, terrible meeting. And I owe my life to them. I owe my life to them. And that's how I found my sponsor. So I want to tell you a little bit about my sponsor, Albert Rogers, who took me through my first 15 years of sobriety. And we began to focus, on the restoration of the second step. He said, a lot of people think that the second step says you're going to return to sanity. You're going to return to, you don't want to return to anything. Trust me on this. You don't want to return to anything you were doing. You don't want to return to anybody that you knew. You don't want to return to anything. But restoring, if you think about a building, a beautiful architectural building that has class and it has style, and you can look at it and say, I know exactly what era that building came from. And year after year after year after year, the city doesn't take care of the building, and it erodes. And it erodes. And then the glass panes are cracking. And then the foundation starts to go. And the next thing you know, people aren't stopping to look at the building anymore. They're driving past the building because it's really a piece of crap, and they're waiting for the city to condemn it. And that was me. That's what I was. I was a condemned building in Manhattan. And he said, now we're going to talk about what restoration looks like for you. He says, because you start at the foundation, you start at the bottom, and you build up, and you build up. He says, and don't listen to what people are saying, whether it's the journey or the destination. Just trust me on this one. It's neither. It's the company you keep along the way. So choose wisely. Choose wisely. That horrible expression, stick with the winners? How do I know who the winners are? No idea. How about the ones who raise their hand and say they're sober over a year? They've worked the 12 steps and they have a sponsor. Well, they seem to be winners to me. And then he said, because this is how I chose him, he said, make sure you choose someone you don't like. Because you will listen to them. You will not listen to someone that you like. And he says, and a prime manipulator like you is never going to listen to anybody. So he said, things like sanity and higher power are fluid. I didn't understand that. What do you mean they're fluid? He said, because we have a disease of perception. Whatever day of the week I'm waking up on, whatever my spiritual condition is at that moment, that's how I see the world. That's how I see you. There's this passage, I'm not going to tell you where it is. You got to go find it yourself in the Daily Reflections, but I'll tell you it's somewhere in November, about the guy that every night he comes home and the dogs are barking next door at the neighbor's house. He doesn't care. And one night he comes home and the dogs are barking and he wants to take a rifle out and shoot all the dogs. What changed? He changed. Because dogs bark. And so this fluidity of what sanity looks like and what higher power looks like is in direct correlation to where I am in my work as an alcoholic. And I'm not saying where my spiritual condition is. That doesn't come for a really long time. Don't let them fool you. There's no spiritual condition other than showing up in the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're not coming into this room somehow spiritually fit. You're coming into this room hoping there's a seat for you and no one talks to you. That's my condition when I came into AA. And so my other problem with this, though, is that I really thought that I could do it myself. I don't know about you. You could be an alcoholic like me. I didn't want anybody's help for anything. Nothing. Even when I got sick, I'm going to do it myself. I did not want your help for a single thing. Asking for help was a sign of weakness. Believing in God was a crutch I didn't want. And these were tenets that I ascribed to my entire life. Now you come in here and you tell me that unless you do this, you will die. Because you're not going to be able to drink and you're not going to be able to not drink. And so the only choice you have is to just sort of get your arms around something that just says you got to believe in something. I don't know what it is, but something so that we can begin to restore you. I cannot restore myself. I can't really even hammer a nail in. I can't restore myself. You have to do it for me. And there's an old expression, which I love to this day. I get to come to AA to see God with the skin on. I don't even know that that's what's happening to me. But sometimes you're in a room and somebody will say something and it's just going to go right through you. And you think, my God. One time I was at I'm an alcoholic that walks into wrong meetings a lot. And I walked into a meeting that I had no business being in because I didn't do that substance. And I didn't care because I really needed a meeting. And it was New Year's Eve. It seems to be my favorite night of the week. And I walked into this meeting and a guy got up there and he had 6 weeks of sobriety and he was the speaker. And I thought, oh, great. They couldn't get anybody with more than 6 weeks of sobriety to be the speaker. And he got up there and he said, I know that people believe in New Year's resolutions. He said, I really don't believe in New Year's resolution. But if I did, I would have to pray that all my problems moving forward are me. That took me 20 years to learn, 20 years to understand that I was the problem. This guy knew this at 6 weeks. So listen hard when you're in the meetings, because you're going to hear God with the skin on. You're going to hear somebody say something that is not even possible with the amount of time that they have under their belt. Anyway, the next thing that I had to do, and I'm saying that I had to do it. I didn't say that I liked it, and I didn't say I wanted to. This is what I had to do, because this is what I was at that place, that beautiful place where somebody tells you what to do and you do it. I'm not at that place anymore, by the way, but I used to be. And Albert would say to me, look for evidence of things you don't understand. You know, this was his beginning to show me where God was. He'd say, look for evidence of things you don't understand. I said, like what? He said, go out in Central Park and look for evidence of love. Now, if you want to be leveled, go out there and look for evidence of love. Because I can't tell you what it looks like, but I do know it when I see it. And I would go to Central Park day after day, and I would look for evidence of love. And then I'd come back and he'd say, good. Now go out there and look for evidence of the wind. Because you can't see it, can't hold it, can't smell it. Look for evidence of the wind. Continue to look for evidence of things you don't understand, because that is the essence of step 2. Of trying to believe, of being willing to believe something that I don't understand. That's all it is. It's not some big equation out there. And the longer you don't understand it, the better it's going to be when you get it, because the longer it will stay with you. You turn around and you go out to Central Park one day and you go, I got it all. I got evidence of the wind and I got evidence of love. And by the way, I found some evidence of God. That's going to leave you in about a week. But if you go out there and you're talking out loud and you take a little book with you and you write it down, you write down all the things that you see evidence of that you don't understand, and that little book fills up, that stays with you the rest of your life. The rest of your life. And then if you're lucky, you know, when you begin to actually have real conversations with people, you know, that are not drunk conversations with people, you're going to recognize evidence of love. That's what AA is about. But you can't recognize it until you've been practicing it long enough to say, I don't actually know what love looks like. I don't know what the wind looks like. I know what evidence of the wind is. And I certainly didn't know what God was. And he said, now go back out to the park and show me evidence of God. That was hard. That was really hard, because I'm a New Yorker. I'm not like a nature person. I couldn't stand the fact he was sending me out to the park. You know, I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking for. But what he did was he prepared me for looking for evidence of other things that I didn't understand. And by the time I got to evidence of God, I was calm. You understand? I was calm. I wasn't anxious that I couldn't figure out what evidence of God looked like. And that's the most important thing, that I went through a process with him where I remained calm. And then one day I saw it. And I saw it. And I saw it in the park. And I saw it between a man and woman. And I came back. And he said, how do you know that that wasn't evidence of love? I said, I'm not saying it wasn't. But what I saw was evidence of God. And he said, you have to remember what Chuck Chamberlain said. What you're looking for, you're looking with. God is within us. God is within each and every one of us. So what you're looking for, you're looking with. So if you're looking for God, God's inside of you. It's not far to look. It's a process. It's a process. And by the way, the nicest thing about it is no wrong way to do it. Absolutely no wrong way to do it. You know, Chuck C., who was Clancy's sponsor, it's a terrible analogy. He was a deer hunter. And one day, you know, I don't know, he shot a bunch of deer, I guess, and he was coming back out. And some guy came over and he goes, oh my God, look how lucky you were. He says, where are they? And Chuck C. goes, you see them where they are. You don't see them where they're not. And that's exactly how we find God. You see him where he is. You're not going to see him where he's not. So this took time. I'm just saying it took a long time for me. And I went out there and I was in the park, you know, for a very long time. And I've sent every person, man, woman, that I've ever sponsored outside looking for evidence. Sometimes I make it up. Look for evidence of this. Look for evidence of... Doesn't matter what it is, as long as you don't understand it. As long as you don't understand what you're looking for. So that you remain teachable. And we'll talk about that when we get to the 7th step. So the book tells us that there are 3 kinds of alcoholics. Those who won't believe, those who can't believe, those who believe that God exists, but he can't help. I really, with all due respect, I so disagree with that. So disagree with that. I wish I could have gotten it down to 3. Many, many, many more. What about the person, who once believed? And what about the person who wants to believe? And what about the person who's afraid to believe? Look what I'm putting on the line. I am afraid at this moment to put myself into a power greater than me that I don't yet believe is going to do something, and you're asking me to do it. That's why you have to have a good sponsor. You have to have, a smarter sponsor than you. He says, you don't have to do any of those things. He said, do you believe that I believe? I said, oh, that I believe. He said, good, then you're halfway there. And I did that for a very long time. And I remember when, oh my God, I was newly sober, not sober a long time, and I came into First Things First. And in the back row were 4 rabbis. I'll never forget this. 4 Hasidic rabbis sitting there, and I looked at Albert, who, by the way, was black with dreadlocks. And, I said to him, look at those guys over there. I said, if they can't find God, what choice do I have? What chance do I have? I'm screwed here. And he said to me, Carin, you misunderstand what you're looking at. He says, those 4 guys, those 4 rabbis, they found God. He says, they're here because they have no faith. And we'll talk about that a little later as well, because there is a big difference between finding God and having faith, So then my next, wall that I hit was, don't talk to me about God's will, really. Because if you're in Alcoholics Anonymous long enough, you will hear 150,000 versions of what God's will is for me. I have yet to meet anybody who had a cup of coffee with God and told him what his will was. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's an intuitive feeling. It's an intuitive feeling. They tell us that in the 9th step. You get it in the promises, but you get it right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, when you're sitting there and you're discussing God and you're talking about God and you have an intuitive feeling. It helps in this program to create some enthusiasm for being here. I know many of you don't want to be here, but it helps to create some enthusiasm. The Greek for enthusiasm comes from from the inside, theo, God. So to become enthusiastic about AA pushes your chances for success even further along. And you want that. You want to be successful in AA. So anyway, he pushed this on me and talking about God's will. He says, don't worry about it. Don't worry about anybody says about God's will. I loved that he said that. It's important to know. I love that he told me not to worry. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. Everything will have its own time. And he said, when you stop thinking about what God's will is for you, then you'll know what God's will is for you. He says, because generally it's the same for everybody. We just like to complicate things up. We just like to make up different things. But it's really pretty much the same for everybody. You all have it in this room right now. I mean, you take a look around. You're sober. The other shoe's dropped. You're here in a room with Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm pretty sure that's what God's will is for me. And I live to live another day and tell another story and be sober another day and help another alcoholic. I'm pretty sure that's what God's will is. Because if I thought God's will was for me, is that I would be happy and wealthy and all this stuff, then God has failed me, but that's not what it is. If you're an alcoholic like me, I waited my whole life for the other shoe to drop. Always waiting, always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for something bad to happen. Well, it's already happened. The other shoe has dropped, you're in AA. That's it. It doesn't get any different than that. The other thing I want to talk about just a little bit is about my first, when I wasn't looking for it, my first act of seeing God with the skin on, when I wasn't looking for it. And that's in my home group of First Things First. I used to count days, pretty much like this, only a little bit different. They used to count days up to 90 days in the beginning of the meeting, and people would say their name and they would announce their time. I have 70 days, clap, clap, and I have 50 days, clap, clap, and I never shared my time. I didn't like you, so it wasn't your business. So, I never said anything at all. And one day I was in there, and they're, counting days, and the guy in the back of the room said, my name is Tom, and she has 88 days. And that is the first act of unconditional love I ever experienced in AA, and that was God with the skin on. This guy didn't know me. He didn't want anything from me, but he watched me get sober. He watched my days, day after day after day after day. I never counted days. And so the next day I came in and I kind of felt a little obligated. And I said, I'm Carin and I have 89 days. And everybody clap, clap, clap. And then the next day I came in and I said, I'm Carin, I have 90 days. And they brought me up and they gave me my bronze. There was bronze token in those days, bronze. And I said, thank you so much. I went to sit down and they said, where are you going? You're the speaker. Now, if I'd been paying attention at all in that meeting, which clearly I hadn't, I would have seen other people with 90 days who were the speaker. And I said, there's no way I can stand up here and speak. I have nothing to say. And the chairperson says to me, just do what Lloyd did last week. I said, Lloyd? Lloyd got up there and said, my name is Lloyd, I'm an alcoholic, and he cried for 20 minutes. I said, and then they gave him a standing ovation. So I don't know what I did. I said something, but that was the first time I ever spoke in AA. Anyway, at the end of that meeting, when I got my 90 days, Albert said that, take a look at step 2. There's another thing in there that's not true. Get a sponsor that reads these steps. Get a sponsor that knows what they're talking about. They're going to kill me. By the way, last week I said get off of Zoom. You have no idea how many text messages I got from people who were on Zoom saying, I'm so sorry I was on Zoom. I'm so sorry. Listen, just to clear the record, I do 2 Zoom meetings a week. So you're all off the hook out there in Zoom land. 2 meetings a week. Anyway, get a sponsor who reads it. Clancy used to say, just read the black parts. Don't interpret what they're talking about. Because nobody in this room, anywhere, is smart enough to interpret what this guy's writing in here. Just read the black parts. And it says that this is the rallying point for us. And Albert said, what do you think about that? I said, I don't think that's true. He said, because it's not. It is not a rallying point. You are not a cheerleader. You're not going to get up there with pom-poms. You're a nasty, belligerent, regretful, rueful, angry alcoholic. Do you think someone is rallying with you? He said, no. Step 2 pushes us into uncertainty. And here's the deal about uncertainty. We have to embrace uncertainty with every fiber of our being. Because the fact is that some of the most beautiful chapters in our lives won't have a title until much later. And we'll be living in that uncertainty for quite some time. And that's what step 2 does. It pushes me into uncertainty. It makes me hold another alcoholic's hand and say, I don't know how to do this by myself. You have to help me. It helps me listen. It helps me commit. And when Albert Rogers said to me, I will be your sponsor, if you are willing to stay sober somebody else's way, that was the entire requirement. If you have a sponsor that has more requirements than that, look around. Look around. He never said, call me every day. He never said, you got to do this. No computers, so he never downloaded any of those crazy step sheets that they download. And this is how you do the 4th step, is that you go along with these sheets. And here's the reality. We're the sheets. We're your foundation. We're your answers. You need to get it from another alcoholic so you understand the language, because we're the only ones that get each other. And it has to be that way, because when you're in the 2nd step and you're trying to get that 2nd step, you got to be next to somebody who gets you. You got to be next to somebody who understands you. Otherwise, you turn around and say, my case is different. You don't get me. You don't understand what's going on with me. If you had the life that I had, hold on a second. I have had the life that you have. That's why it's so important to recognize somewhere in there that we are not alone, that we go through these steps with another human being. So the last thing that I want to talk about here is, in the principle behind the 2nd step is hope. And it may not feel that way when you're getting into this area of uncertainty and you don't know what you're doing and you can't find God, and, you feel a little hopeless here because you're not really sure you're doing it well or you're doing it right. So this is what I'm going to say, and stick with me here. In the 2nd step, hope ceases to become this verb. Like, I hope you stay sober, or I hope I see you next week, or I hope we can do this together. And it becomes a noun, and a noun alone. And it becomes, I'm an alcoholic, and I don't know how, but I have managed to stay sober for 90 days. And I can't tell you how I did that. But I can tell you that if you do what I did, you will stay sober for 90 days. And you give it away. And you give that little piece of hope, that little gift of hope away. And then you have nothing. So you got to stay sober so you can get a little bit more hope inside of you. And then you meet another person and you give away a little bit more help over there. And you give hope away as much as you can because God and nature abhor a vacuum. And as soon as you give away the hope, you get it back. And you get it back more. And then someone talks to you and says, this is what's happened to me. I want to say that when you give away this hope, and when more hope comes in, it comes in extraordinary ways. I'll go into this, and I'm not sure where we'll do this, but we'll do this somewhere, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what happened when my husband died. But I used to talk about it ad nauseum in the room. I couldn't get over it. It took me years. Couldn't get over it. It wasn't that he died; it was the way he died. It was violent, and he was killed, and it was not. Wasn't the script I wrote? Wasn't the script I wrote? And he died on my 5th anniversary, and my 5th anniversary is coming up. And I have this thing, and I talk to my sponsor about it. I have this thing that comes up every year on my anniversary, sober anniversary, 5th year, that I have this choice to make. And I can take that 5th year anniversary, and I can think about him all day long and cry for the life we never had or weren't gifted, or how much different my life turned out the way it was. Or I can turn around and live the joy through the sorrow and celebrate the fact that I'm this many years sober, that I've connected with this many alcoholics, that I've had this kind of a life. And so here's the thing. It may seem like an easy decision, but it's not. What I do, because this is what I was taught, was give myself the grace, the time to make that decision every year. Every year. And by the time my anniversary comes, I know what to say when I pick up my coin. I know what to say. And it's no coincidence that, for almost 37 years, I've chosen to live the joy through the sorrow. But I still make the decision. And that's what we're going to talk about next week in making the decision. So the last thing that I want to talk to you about is the first time that I really kind of felt this whole God prayer thing and didn't understand it. And it can come at any time. I was 6 years sober, 7 years sober, something like that. And my second husband took me to court because he wanted to. And he took me to court for custody of our son. And the judge, he brought up experts that talked about alcoholism and pretty much convinced the judge that I could pick up a drink the next day. I was already 6 years sober. And anyway, they took my son. They took him. And it was hard to come back into the rooms and talk about, you're sober 6 years, you can have what I have, like that. And so I left. I didn't leave AA, I just left where I was. And I went down to North Carolina. And every day I would go into the cornfields, because don't go to North Carolina if you're looking for the city, because all it is cornfields and all these other fields. And I used to go out into the fields and shout F you to God at the top of my lungs. I was so angry. I thought I had done everything right. I thought I had done everything you asked me to do. I thought that I had attended enough meetings and I'd helped enough alcoholics, and I was in this program and I was doing it right, and I hadn't had a drink or a drug in 6 years, and why is this happening now? And F you. And I came back and I called Albert, and then he said to me, well, at last you're praying. And I thought, well, I need a new sponsor. I did not like that response at all. So in closing up, I want to say that we got a lot of work to do in here, because God is big, and it takes a while. It takes a while to feel comfortable. But, the truth is, all we got is time, right? That's it. That's all we got is time. And so the last thing that I want to leave you with is that the thing that happens when you get hope is that it has two sort of like evil stepsisters that come with it. Trust, and love. And we get these things. The more hope we acquire as a noun, and the more we give away, what we get back in kind is trust. What we get back in kind is love. And if you think it's easy to receive those things, it isn't. And I know it isn't. And I was hard, and I didn't want to receive it. But eventually my armor came down, and I said, okay, the other shoe dropped. I'm here. So I think that's it for me for tonight. We're going to talk about the third step next week, and this is a joy. Thank you for letting me share. It's a great day to share.